Hello, and welcome to this short lecture on sustainable development and systems thinking. So, in this video, we'll just quickly look at how sustainable development and systems thinking are intertwined and how systems thinking will play an important role in achieving the sustainable development goals, and already is. So, this video is brought to you by COSY, the Cozy Thinking Project. So, CO here stands for complex, SY for systems. So, it's complex systems thinking. And this is a topic that I am sure most of you are somewhat familiar with, and the same goes for sustainable development. But in order to make sure that everybody is on the same page, we will first begin by defining both sustainable development and systems thinking. So, sustainable development defined, it is the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Systems thinking defined is the ability to collectively analyze complex systems across different domains, society, environment, economy, and across different scales, local to global, thereby considering cascading effects, inertia, feedback loops, and other systemic features related to sustainability issues and sustainability problem-solving frameworks. So I've chosen this definition of systems thinking from Remington Duchette et al. Because it clearly gives rise to the similarities between sustainable development and systems thinking by the mention of society, environment, and economy. And it is also useful because it mentions cascading effects, inertia, feedback loops, because these are important phrases and concepts that you will need to understand in order to have a good grasp on systems thinking. The more complex you go into it, and of course there is an enormous amount of depth in this topic, but I think in order for us to first gain a simple understanding of systems thinking, we will start at the base level. And I think probably for me, one of the best things that I began to understand within systems thinking is that it is and can be seen as the language that is required to actually understand and work in sustainable development, because sustainable development itself is a systems thinking concept essentially, because it uses or addresses rather the society, environment, and economy domains of our world, and that in itself requires one to have a systems thinking view, because that is a system. There are three interdependent domains there that each themselves exist, but are intertwined and act with one another, and that is the way that we need to view the world in order for us to sustainably develop. So more on this in the next slide. So just again to bring it back to sustainable development. Sustainability, as many of us have seen before, they use the image of a stool, that sustainability is based off environmental, social, and economic aspects, and without one of these legs to the stool is no more. The stool will fall over, and that is the issue that we're facing for many reasons. One would argue that the environmental aspect is probably the most fickle and one that needs the most attention at the moment, because of course, if we do not have, I suppose, a thriving biosphere, we don't have a thriving society or a thriving economy. So sustainable development looks at economic growth in a sustainable fashion, one that is going to respect the environment and respect the society rather. From an environmental point of view, we're looking at protecting the resources that we have in order for us to be able to use them in the future as well, and that falls into the definition quite easily there. From a social point of view, we're looking at progression and inclusion across all different domains of society and at different levels of social development and economic development. So we will move on to some examples that I put together. So in this example, we're going to be looking at the environment, and the issue we're going to address is flood defense. The scenario that I've created for this example is that major flooding has become more frequent in a large town. And what I'm going to try and communicate to you in this example is that there is a difference between the traditional scientific thinking and systems thinking. Traditional scientific thinking will often come up with a symptomatic solution. Systems thinking will more often than not come up with a fundamental solution. And I suppose the difference between the two is that one, the traditional scientific thinking, will hone in on singular details and fine details of an issue, whereas systems thinking will take a step back and look at the bigger issue and make an appropriate decision or change to a system that will positively impact the issue in the future. So the challenge we're facing in this scenario is that an increasing frequency in flooding events and habitat loss is causing damage to infrastructure. So the symptomatic solution is to build a dam or another bigger dam. And yes, this will improve the situation, but is it a solution that's going to impact it further into the future? Is it going to last? Is there going to be other issues that come with building a dam? Of course, there will be, because what you're doing when building a dam is holding back water. That water has to go somewhere. It will go to its flood banks or it will flood somewhere else upstream. So the fundamental solution to this scenario is to rejuvenate wetland habitats. These will naturally defend against flooding them because wetland habitats, which is in the name, they soak in enormous amounts of water during flooding events. And this is systems thinking incorporated. So I hope now we can see the difference here between looking at the bigger picture being that there is a way to tackle this issue in a natural way, and that rejuvenating the wetland habitats would have many benefits. Of course, it would reduce the impact of flooding, but also there is the benefit of biodiversity. Rejuvenating this habitat, huge amounts of birds that will come in, and so on goes the food chain and the various benefits to biodiversity. So on to the next example. So we have example 2 here is social. So we're looking at community aspect. So the scenario here is attempting to solve a homelessness crisis in a major city. And again, we're looking at a symptomatic solution versus a systems thinking solution, which is again, symptomatic is the traditional linear scientific thinking. Fundamental solution is the systems thinking modern solution. So a quick fix may be to increase the availability of emergency housing and shelter. This would be beneficial, but does it address the whole issue? And that's an important question, because that would be a symptomatic solution. Of course, it would improve the scenario, but it doesn't address the scenario. So emergency housing and shelters, of course, would give a place for people who are experiencing homelessness to have shelter, to have a place to live for a short period of time. But it's not going to necessarily solve the issue. So a more effective solution would be to conduct a broad systems analysis to highlight the driving factors to the crisis. So step back, look at the bigger picture, and have a look at what's causing the issue. So conducting this analysis and reacting to the outcomes will expose better ways to prevent and reverse homelessness. This is a fundamental solution, and systems thinking is incorporated. So moving on, we will look at the Sustainable Development Goals now. So I'm sure that everybody is familiar with these. You may not know them off by heart, because I don't, but I am learning them slowly but surely. So 1 to 17 here, we have a look at everything in terms of sustainable development, and this is all a system also, we have to remember. So from an economic point of view, we're looking at sustainable cities, industry, innovation, number 9 here, 8, decent work and economic growth. From an environmental point of view, we're looking at affordable and clean energy, number 7, number 13, climate action, number 14, life below water, and 15, life on land, as well as many more. And then from a social point of view, we have peace, justice, and strong institutions. We have number 2, zero hunger. We have number 3, good health and well-being, and so on. What I am trying to communicate here is that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are incorporating systems thinking for sure. And this is how they got to this point. They had to apply systems thinking, because you had to take take a step back and look at this bigger picture to understand the issue at hand of sustainable development. And just to bring this sustainable development view to another level of understanding, we will look at another illustration from the United Nations. So this is the Sustainable Development Goals again, but it's looking at them in a different manner. So we see here that economy is on the top, society is second, and biosphere is on the bottom here. So what we're looking at here is essentially a chain of command, a chain of reliance, really, because society relies on the biosphere, economy relies on society. Everything relies on the biosphere. If we don't have a sustainable, clean, and reliable biosphere, which is the source of all our food, our energy, our water, we can't sustain ourselves as society. And then economy cannot sustain itself if we can't sustain society. And you can see what's actually happening here. So there is, I suppose, a reliance here on each of the levels, biosphere being the most important. So I think this in itself, this visualization of the Sustainable Development Goals, is a further view of a system. It's visualizing the system as it is. So I believe that this is a great way to understand what the United Nations have done in order to get these 17 Sustainable Development Goals prepared and delivered to us. They had to think about it in a systems thinking fashion. So that is all for this lecture. I hope it was helpful, and thank you.